All right, let's jump right in. Every single day, you've got millions of tons of cargo moving all over the world. It's this huge, incredibly complex dance of logistics. But what if I told you that the fate of a multi-million-dollar shipment, we're talking the payment, the delivery, the legal standing of a ship's captain, could all come down to one single piece of paper? We see these absolutely massive container ships and think they're the engines of global trade. And yeah, they are, but the real engine, the thing that actually makes it all turn, is the paperwork. And one document in particular is the absolute lifeblood of every single shipment. Because in this world, what's written down on paper is reality. So when the actual physical stuff in the cargo hold doesn't match the paperwork, well, that's when you get a really intense, high-stakes problem for the one person caught right in the middle, the ship's master. So, to really get a handle on this dilemma, we have to understand the document at the very heart of it all. It's called the Bill of Lading, and believe me, in the world of shipping, it's basically the golden ticket. So, what is a Bill of Lading, or BLL for short? Well, on the surface, it's the official, legally binding contract between the person shipping the goods and the company carrying them. It lists out all the details, what it is, how much of it there is, and where it's going. But its job goes way, way beyond just being a simple list. The Bill of Lading really has three massive functions. First, it's a receipt. Simple enough. It proves the carrier has the cargo. Second, it's the evidence of the contract to move that cargo. But this third function, this is the one that changes everything. It is a document of title. Think of it this way. Whoever holds the original Bill of Lading literally owns the goods. It's the key to the cargo. And because of that, every single shipper on the planet wants one very specific thing, a Bill of Lading that is marked clean on board. This is the carrier's official stamp of approval, saying, yep, we got the goods and they look to be in great condition. Why is this so important? Well, because banks, especially when they're using something called a letter of credit, will absolutely not release payment to the seller without it. It's simple. No clean bill, no money. Period. And right here is where our perfect, neat little system of paperwork smashes headfirst into the messy, complicated reality of the physical world. This is where the trouble starts. See, under big international maritime laws, like the Hague-Visby rules, the ship's master has a legal duty. They have to inspect the cargo while it's being loaded and write down its apparent order and condition. Now, they don't have to be a grain expert or a steel specialist, but they do have to honestly describe what their eyes see. So what happens when the shipper's paperwork says 1,000 perfect, shiny steel coils, but what the master sees are coils that are already wet and showing rust as they come on board his ship? Or what if the bill says 10,000 tons of grain were loaded, but the ship's own high-tech measurements show something completely different? And you know what's really interesting? There's kind of an unwritten rule for this stuff. While it's not a hard and fast law, a difference in quantity of more than 0.5% for bulk cargo is almost always seen as a significant difference. So if you're off by more than that, the master can't just shrug and sign off on the shipper's numbers. They've got a serious problem on their hands. And this puts the master at this incredible fork in the road. On one hand, they have a legal duty to tell the truth on that document. On the other hand, they are under huge commercial pressure from the shipper, who is desperate, absolutely desperate, to get that clean bill so they can get paid. This flowchart just lays out that choice perfectly. The path splits right here. One way leads to that clean bill of lading. That's the smooth, easy road the shipper wants. But the other path, the one you take when you find problems, that leads to a much more complicated place. That other path is to issue what's called a claused bill of lading. You might also hear it called a dirty bill. This is where the master just does their job and writes down the problem, something like 250 steel coils loaded wet and rust stand. Now, this fulfills their legal duty to be honest, but we already know what happens next. A bank is going to reject that document in a heartbeat, and the shipper's payment is now frozen. So the shipper is now facing a potential financial disaster. And that's when they often propose a shortcut. It's a document that seems like a simple, elegant solution for everyone. The letter of indemnity. Okay, so a letter of indemnity, or an LOI, is basically a deal. The shipper comes to the master and says, look, I know some of those coils are a little rusty. Just do me a favor, sign the bill of lading as clean so I can get paid by the bank. In return, I'll give you this letter that promises to cover all of your costs if the buyer on the other end complains and makes a claim against you for rust damage. I mean, on the surface, it sounds like a pretty smart business solution, right? The shipper gets paid, the cargo moves, the carrier is protected by this promise. So you take the deal, right? Problem solved? Yeah? Not even close. Because this shortcut isn't some clever workaround, it is a trap. A trap with devastating legal and financial consequences that could literally bankrupt a shipping company. And here is the absolute critical point. The big maritime insurers, the P&I clubs, they couldn't be more clear about this. Knowingly signing a clean bill for cargo you know is damaged isn't just bending the rules. Under English law, which governs a massive chunk of these contracts, it is an act of fraud against the buyer. And that one act of fraud makes that letter of indemnity completely worthless. You just have to remember the 3 U's. First, it's unenforceable. Why? Because courts will not enforce a contract that was created to commit a fraud. Second, it's unsecured. The shipper could go bankrupt or just disappear tomorrow and you'd have nothing. And third, and this is the absolute killer, it's uninsured. The moment you participate in fraud, your multi-million-dollar P&I insurance policy is void. You are completely and totally on your own. So if that dangerous shortcut is a trap, what is the right way to handle all this pressure? Well, thankfully, there is a clear defensive playbook that protects the carrier and upholds the law. The playbook is all about being careful and defensive. First, you verify all the data, double-check your own figures, compare the ship's numbers to the shore's numbers, and flat out refuse to sign anything you know is wrong. Second, you communicate formally. You issue what's called a note of protest, but you also keep talking with the shipper to try and fix the figures. And most importantly, you get backup. You call your P&I club immediately and ask for their advice. You never, ever sign a document you know is false. But what about that intense pressure from the contract? A lot of these agreements have a clause that requires the master to sign bills of lading as presented. But here's what you have to remember. The law is absolutely firm on this. That contract clause does not and cannot force a master to violate their more important, overriding legal duty to accurately record the cargo's true condition. Their duty to the truth always comes first. So at the end of the day, it all comes down to this one moment of truth. Imagine it. You're the master, standing on the bridge. The holds are full, but you know some of that cargo is damaged. The shipper is on the phone, practically begging you, waving this letter of indemnity, saying his business will fail if you don't sign a clean bill. The whole supply chain, the bank, the buyer, they're all waiting on your signature. What do you do? The answer to that question defines the very fine line between integrity and fraud on the high seas.